gonna hold this up because that's basically what Luis Rodriguez said. Yeah. This is actually one of the signs here from the Zenden. I guess that'll be plugged up or something.
Nice.
Yeah. Is working. Turn on. Hold this up. Oh, there it goes. Finally. That's basically what Luis Rodriguez said. All right, there we go. Yeah. This is actually one of the signs here. Cool. Pull up what I'm gonna say here. See how it like lags? Yeah. All right. Well, the reason I was holding up that sign is because right before we started, Luis Rodriguez told or sent his blessings to Cecilia Caballero, who's reading for us today, and we're so excited for this actually. So welcome everyone watching. I'm Jesse Tovar. My Place Cafe presents Afternoon Prose featuring Cecilia Caballero, and as Daniel Jose Ruiz says, even if it's owned digitally. They actually met last November at an event that Ruiz read at a space called Arte, and I'll be talking a bit about Arte today. So today has been eventful, and speaking of today, look how bright and sunny it is. In fact, I'm gonna turn my laptop around so you can see the view. This is like the second part of Hensteve Square here in Pasadena, Altadena border. And I'm over here today. I'm reading from the Zenden which is an upstairs space, which will be a yoga studio in a few weeks here above my Place Cafe. So like I had mentioned, Luis J. Rodriguez, he was in the house today speaking with the Alta Paso neighborhood. In addition, his governor candidacy campaign held a pop-up signature and donation drive. My Place wishes him good luck. Again, I also want to remind you that Zenden is a yoga studio that will be active and ready for you to take a class here. Opening day is February 2nd. So if you're an English graduate student or a student in general that feels overwhelmed with the seminars, AKA courses and all, yoga is what you need to do to de-stress. Trust me, I'm glad I did so. I just got my master's like last spring. And the reason I'm saying I'm glad I did so because it felt somewhat semi-forced by the university, but I'm glad it worked out because I got to enjoy yoga. And this was again semi-forced to keep my grant money. I know it's a long story. I'm glad the universe made it this way. Again, student, do yoga. For now, this afternoon's featured writer is also a poet. She's been published in several anthologies in 2021, including Dryland magazine. Last year, I brought up Arte in Boyle Heights during some My Place Cafe events. Viva Padilla is the owner of Arte and founder of Dryland. I met Cecilia Caballero last year at Arte. Anyways, when Dryland released their 11th issue at the end of last year, I saw that Caballero has an essay in there, a creative nonfiction piece titled My Dad Who Bakes Bread. The first paragraph alone shows how badly I want to write a poem that lists how to, and the in-between ever since I cooked steak with leftover steak juice infused with butter, garlic, and thyme on New Year's Day. If that sounds confusing, this type of poem I'm referring to is well executed by Natalie Santos-Zapico, and to be more pertinent, like Water for Chocolate, which is a novel and a movie. Ruiz has taught that book, by the way. Anyways, going back to My Dad Who Bakes Bread, there is a line I find quite striking, which is, quote, I met my mother's father only a few times, and my father's father passed away before I was born. Now I only have stories that I have to make up, end quote. This is not to say Caballero gives oral fictional stories, but she must carry on her family's memory in her own words, her own unique creativity with prose writing. Think about presenting facts in court. Truth is, those facts are the product of making stories. The ending had me shed tears a bit, which states, quote, I wonder how my father's hand shaped the candied swirls and loops again and again, with no measurement, only the weight of flour in the palm of one hand and sugar in the other, end quote. One of her father's conchas, Caballero's son tried as a baby, I paraphrase that last part I just said right now. So sometimes we wonder in awe how our parents can do things that we do ourselves, only with more precision that may in fact be unnecessary due to a lack of confidence within ourselves as our parents' children. So I end by plugging Dryland 11 so you can read My Dad Who Bakes Bread for yourself. Speaking of Dryland, we will have the assistant editor read at My Place Cafe next month. For now, this afternoon, Jody Smith, the owner of Zenden, Latanya Smith, the owner of My Place Cafe, and I welcome Cecilia Caballero.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you also for your comments on the essay, for everything that you're doing and that My Place Cafe is doing, Dryland. So I'm just so happy to be part of Southern California, the arts community, especially with BIPOC people. So thank you so much. It's an honor. I'm going to start today by reading a short poem titled Dear Fear. And this is dedicated to Thich Nhat Hanh, who just transitioned. And this poem was inspired by some of his teachings and his books. My favorite one is called Peace is Every Step. So I encourage, if anyone's new to his work, that's a great one to start with. And he's also a poet. The way that he writes with simplicity and beauty and truth. And so I will begin with this poem to honor him. Dear Fear. Dear Fear, I will hold your hand in the dark. I know that you are here because all you really want is protection. Fear, you are a delicate and mysterious and needy thing. That means that you are like me, and I have learned that all you really want to know is the shape of safety and soft places to sit. Dear Fear, you will always be a part of me. This means that you are a gift too. Yes, it's true. Dear Fear, come with me as I ease down the river of my life, heading into the lushness of myself and the parts of the path that I cannot see yet. Fear, you are there in that moment when an acorn holds its breath and then allows itself to sprout bravely into both earth and sky at the same time. Dear Fear, did you know that when you leap from seed to tree, that love is always there waiting for you too? You taught me this. Dear Fear, my friend, this means that I wouldn't know love without you. So that's my poem for Thich Nhat Hanh. The power of love and compassion in our communities that we need for social justice and liberation. And this just came to me in a workshop, kind of all at once. And sometimes I feel like I just need to read it for myself when I feel afraid or worried, just kind of, holding these emotions. So, and that's one thing that I've learned from Thich Nhat Hanh and other teachers. And with that said, I want to go into the first piece I'm going to read, which is titled Mothering While Brown. And I think this was published originally on the Chicana Motherwork blog. I think, was it 2017 or 2018? And the reason I'm starting with this is because although I've been a writer all my life, it's only really since the pandemic that I have been putting more time and intention with writing and submitting my work. And I feel like only recently I'm just coming back to myself as a writer. I did write this piece, Mothering While Brown. It's about my experience being racially profiled at the Huntington Library when I went to go see Octavia Butler's exhibit that she had there. And I posted it on the Chicana Motherwork website just thinking that my friends would read it, maybe like 10 people. Turns out it got tens of thousands of views in, like 2 days. And the president of the Huntington just contacted me, the very next day, and it was just kind of going everywhere on Twitter, so that was just kind of an experience. It did take me a little longer to get to the point where now I'm more consistent with my writing and publishing, but this one is close to my heart, and it's still taught in universities, and people still ask me about it, so that's just, I'm always surprised. It's just, I feel like this is a little essay that I think it's been published in republished in 2 or 3 other venues since then. And also, it was cited in an article in the LA Times this past summer about racism and institutional racism at the Huntington, and kind of how my essay kind of helped, impact the workers, BIPOC workers who are there. So there's just so much that happened with this little essay, and I'll go ahead and read it. So this is called Mothering While Brown in White Spaces, or When I Took My Son to Octavia Butler's Exhibit. Mothering while brown means all the times I've been told, not asked, to leave white spaces while with my child. University classrooms, academic conferences, exhibits, museums, cafes, restaurants. So you mother while brown anyway. You don't have the luxury otherwise. You mother while brown in white spaces and white buildings and white walls and white statues, and all you can see is the whiteness of their white teeth telling you to please kindly just shut your kid up, go away, and leave it all for them again. Mothering while brown in white spaces means that my son, Aloncito, is a liability, a distraction, a nuisance, an irritant, an aberration of a little brown boy with brown eyes that they refuse to look into, because they will only see the emptiness of their nice, polite, white policies reflected back to them, their rules and regulations printed on official white sheets of paper. I mothered while brown when I visited Octavia Butler's archives, which are housed in a sprawling white space, the Huntington Library in San Marino, California, 12 miles away and a 30-minute drive from Boyle Heights, where I live, and even longer on public transportation. The Huntington was founded by Henry E. Huntington, a white settler who amassed a fortune in California with railroads and property rights upheld by the land and labor of others who looked like us. His name hides their names, and I know this isn't all his. Here, the price for admission is $21 for students with ID and $13 for youth over 4 years old. Are 4-year-olds considered youth or preschoolers? How do they demarcate this difference? You question this, but you know the answer is eaten by the accumulation of wealth. I had applied for an internal fellowship through my institution, where I was asked to justify, in an essay, why I should gain access to Octavia's archives for my dissertation. My application was rejected, and instead it was awarded to a white woman who studies Elizabethan literature. She has access here, but I do not. So I pay the money to see Octavia's archives behind glass and rules and time and distance and money. I do it for Octavia because I have no other choice. My friend, another brown woman, drove from East LA and picked my son and me up for the long drive across town. From the car, I watched the landscape shifting from a brown space to a white space as we traversed from freeway to freeway through smog and sunlight. We ride past white, multi-million-dollar mansions that line the streets leading up to the Huntington. Octavia grew up in Pasadena, 4 miles and a 10-minute drive away, but I know that she did not benefit from the wealth of this neighborhood. She wrote in an essay once that her mother cleaned homes for white people, and they ordered her to use the back entrance unseen. Here, the white majestic mansions have vast green lawns, as if the droughts in California never existed. These white mansions are cleaned so well that you almost can't tell the subtle differences in the gradients of nice white bright paint on doors, columns, pillars, bird fountains, mailboxes. You have to look closely at the wealth, look very closely at the unseen. But Octavia's archives are here, so you go and pay the money at the admission booth. It is a lot of money. They don't need our admission fees, but they ask for it and collect it anyway. You bring an avocado and a bag of plantain chips and a water canteen and an applesauce cup to save money on lunch. We enter the Huntington grounds. A pamphlet proudly states that there are 50,000 native plants here, neatly maintained in acres and rows and hills and fences, with tiny signs displaying their Latin names in neat white print. And I know that these are not their true names. We walk toward the white building that contains her exhibit. I hold my son's hand and walk up the white steps and see the window of the front door entrance, tinted like the black cold nothingness of a police car window. They can see outside, but we can't see inside, and this bothers me. I need to see. I open the door to enter, and a white male docent hovers at the door as if he saw us coming all along. His hand holds the door open just a crack while he blocks the rest of the entrance with his body. His only words were, "No toys," and he's not even looking at me, he's looking at my son. He is a 7-year-old brown boy. My son holds his favorite stuffed animal, a chihuahua the size of my hand. No toys. Unsettled, I tell my son this, and I place the prohibited chihuahua into my purse with his head sticking out, and my son is satisfied. That way he can still see, he says. We enter. I want to see the galaxy of her notebooks, drawings, letters, and photographs, all behind thick glass that will soon be coated with my fascination as evidenced by the stardust of my fingertips. Before we enter the room of the exhibit, Alonso walks 4 or 5 feet in front of me. The white male docent rushes to me and says, "He can't be unattended." He is wrong, he is not unattended, but the space between me and Octavia's archive cracks in half with his assertion of his authority. We enter the exhibit, and Alonso crawls on the floor while he talks to himself about space robots in some kind of battle. The docent walks over to me again, and he says, "He can't be on the floor. He can sit on the bench over there." I look over where he gestures with his hand trailing behind him, almost like an afterthought, to give us an idea about how to get rid of ourselves. I look, and over there means outside of the exhibit, on a bench, in front of a large wall printed with a blown-up portrait of Octavia sitting in a chair with a bookshelf behind her. Next to her portrait is large text that informs visitors of the exhibit name, Octavia Butler, telling our stories. The main exhibit room is mostly empty, and my son isn't bothering anyone, but the docent wants us to leave. He is waiting. Remaining inside the exhibit are white mothers with their children and their toys. The docent does not speak to them. I overhear the white mothers. They paid the money, and they do not know who Octavia is. Oh, she wrote books? Their children play with their toys. The docent spoke to me 3 times, but he didn't speak to them. They leave their fingerprints on top of mine, pointing at this or that, a world they do not experience that's contained neatly to satisfy their curiosity in glass display cases. They are in a wormhole that they don't even know exists, bending time and space easily to their will, a superpower that I will never have. But I can see the unseen. I see them all. I leave, and they do not. The docent says nothing when he watches my son and me walk out the door. He thinks that it's his space, safe once again, as he peers through the tinted window. A sign in the exhibit reads, "Who has power? Who does not? How can one acquire power? And how power should be used?" All of these pervade Butler's work. The white mothers in the exhibit do not know who Octavia is. They do not know her power or mine. They were not asked to leave. Their children can play with their toys in a white room with white walls that were made for them, for their leisure on sunny days, just like this one, with their expensive oriental parasols that they buy from the cafe for their slow walks along the plants. I walk outside. My son runs in the cool springtime air with his arms up as if to collect all the sunlight. His chihuahua is now liberated from my purse, and he plays hide and seek with it among the looming tree trunks, the branches, the leaves. He belly laughs, and it reverberates back and forth across this white space and time, and no one tells him to be still, be quiet, be gone. Outside, I'm not alone. I see the 50,000 native plants who have been here all along and who will be without their Latin names soon. They will flourish under the brilliance of 50,000 stars. I know this because this is what Octavia foretold about mothers, children, and many, many sons. So this is, I kind of feel like my oldie but goodie. And so then after that, even though I feel like it got such a great response and reaction, and I'm just still so flattered that it still lives, still lives on. You know, it did take me a while to get to the point where I'm writing more consistently. And the next, well, I'll read parts of it. The next one I'm going to read is My Dad Who Bakes Bread. So this was the first essay, actually, and it ended up in Dryland, that when I finally committed to my writing, this was the first piece that I wrote. And I actually wrote the very first draft for VONA 2019 in Southern California. That was the year that VONA wasn't just one centralized event. There was kind of events all over the country. And also this was before COVID. So I wrote the very first draft there and revised it, sent it to Dryland, and I feel like it landed where it was supposed to. Even though I feel like, I feel like this piece was a while ago now, so I've written a lot of new things since then, but it's also important to me because it just came at kind of a pivotal moment in my life. So I will read parts of the essay, My Dad Who Bakes Bread. And in the Dryland issue, there's a beautiful collage by Jacqueline Ariola. And, you know, when I saw it, it's just, I didn't know, when Viva showed me, actually, I just didn't know how to react. And it was later when I was alone, it's just kind of like really feeling it more deeply. Because as a writer, I think this is the first time someone made an art piece about my work. So to see it visually represented just really added another layer for me. And the artist really captured the spirit of this essay, I think, just perfectly and beautifully and powerfully. So I will read a little bit of this essay, My Dad Who Bakes Bread. My father is a panadero. He never uses any measuring cups or spoons, but he knows how to roll the sweetened dough between his fingers from the memory of his own father's baking, my grandfather. My father learned how to bake in a red clay oven in the yard of his childhood home, where his father's voice was a pathway to crystallized sugars and sweets. But here in America, it is different. He works inside the garage on a slate of polished plywood from Home Depot. First, flour and eggs cracked one at a time. Then he pours the melted piloncillo, the color of caramel. He mixes cinnamon into the batter, but not the powdered kind. Instead, he adds whole cinnamon sticks to the rattling Oster blender that shakes the entire laminate kitchen counter until the cinnamon become little shards that get stuck into your teeth. Then he shapes the dough with his fingers and palms, and this requires a delicate touch. His hands, roughened from decades of farm work and manual labor, creates little ears of corn, fat little piglets, concha shells bigger than your fist, twisted goat horns, and polvorones the shape of diamonds. My dad baking bread. My dad bakes bread, and my mother takes the bolillos from the oven and makes dozens of tortas with fried bits of chopped steak, square plastic slices of American cheese, slivers of iceberg lettuce, exactly 2 slices of a tasteless Food for Less tomato, and neatly wraps each one in foil and stacks them into a large cooler with wheels. While she works, my father stacks the pan dulce that looks like animals and seashells and diamonds into wide plastic filing bins from Walmart. My mother and father take the bread, take the tortas, take their quarters and dimes and nickels for change, and drive off in the old forest green Jeep Cherokee with the license plate frame from UC Berkeley. The one in the front says Cal Dad, and the one in the back, Cal Mom. They drive around the parking lots of business parks and grocery stores, my dad opening the filing cabinets to reveal his sugary treasures to hungry customers as they walk back to their cars. There are so many parking lots. This means that there is too much concrete here. Only Mount Diablo in the distance breaks the flatness of the land, with all the housing subdivisions that look the same. I don't sell any food. I ride the BART train to campus and read books. I walk past oak trees in Strawberry Creek and professors and protesters on bullhones at Sproul Plaza. My hands are smooth and light. I can write my notes fast. At Cal, I take a Chicano history course and learn about farm workers in Texas and California in the 1930s. Both of my grandparents were braceros. They crossed the border in trains too, but they worked the earth for the comfort of American grocery shoppers. I open my book, a used copy that someone else already underlined and highlighted for their tests and essays, and I see black and white photos of nameless Mexican farm workers standing near their sheds in the fields, sombreros covering their eyes from the hot sun. They stare at the camera. They have no expression on their face. I wonder if my grandfathers ever looked at cameras like that, documenting themselves for someone else, for researchers, college students, me. I met my mother's father only a few times, and my father's father passed away before I was born. Now I only have stories that I have to make up. What was it like for my grandfathers to come here and then leave the American dream behind them all over again? The black smoke from the train's engine curling up like a question mark into the sky, and then dissipating back into nothingness. My father says nothing. My mother says that my father's father drank himself to death when my father was 17. A habit my father inherited, and one that my mother hates, ripping out the telephone line from the socket and screaming, Dios te va castigar. Except I don't think that God ever did. She shattered glasses against walls. She picked up a kitchen knife and then slammed it back down again, a snarl on her lips like a scar. But the next day, it is quiet again. I can read books when it's quiet. My history book has many photos of Mexican farm workers, but I only ever saw one photo of my father's father, and it's from his funeral. My grandfather is in a casket, and my father, young then, was standing near but looking away. As a teenager, my father was already crisscrossing the border back and forth from Michoacan to LA, and then back again to work in restaurants as a busboy. I imagine that he would put on a red checkered apron and take platefuls of leftovers from these strange Americans who paid for their food and yet often left their orders uneaten. This was an excuse that my father never knew or understood. This was an excess that my father never knew or understood. He and the other workers ate this strange American food from dirtied and discarded plates: biscuits, french fries, pancakes, mashed potatoes. They somehow all tasted the same, bland and oily. He crossed the border for this. It was easier to cross back then. That was before the bigger walls, the bigger budgets. And now my father has been here for 40 years, and he still looks like his father in the casket. The same wide nose, dark lips, curled hair, tan skin, blackness that my father hates in himself and me. I wonder how my father's hands shaped the candied swirls and loops again and again, with no measurements, only the weight of flour in the palm of one hand and sugar in the other, hands that hardened from picking hundreds of strawberries and heads of lettuce with a hunched back in 100-degree heat, hands that gripped too many beer bottles, hands that curled into fists upon my body, my own hands that couldn't stop him, my hands that picked up one of his conchas and gave it to my own son when he was learning to walk. I took a photo of this and put it in his baby book, the one that I got on clearance from Ross, with a smiling cartoon teddy bear on the cover, with pockets that folded out to store any extra precious memories. There is nothing but the photo in there. My hands flipped the pages of that history book, flipping through photos of unnamed Mexican farm workers and precise geography maps of where they worked the earth, with bar graphs of their harvests in both pounds and kilos. My own hands, nourishing myself with each bite of the concha that left a sugary dusting upon my hands and my mouth. And these memories that I cannot measure with any real precision, but I know the feel of it, the weight of it. My father who bakes bread. In the evenings, I come home from campus. My parents come home from selling bread. The next day, my father rolls out the dough with his softness, his sweetness all over again. I watch because I still hope that maybe he will get it just right this time. Yeah, so I decided just to read all the way through. Yeah, so that one, it was difficult to write, but I was interested in the juxtaposition of my dad being a panadero. And, I think in Latinx Mexican culture, it's kind of almost like a, something that's easily identifiable. Like you can buy like concha pins or, shirts or pillows. And as a daughter of a panadero, it's just like, I know, the whole process of how this bread gets made, but I had this image in my mind of my dad, on the one hand, being abusive, but on the other hand, creating this beautiful pan dulce with the same hands, and my hands trying to raise my son differently, but also at the time going to college, reading, writing, so trying to make sense of the intergenerational trauma. Was I passing it on to my son by handing him the concha, or is there a way, a different way to be, or is there, what are the pathways to healing? So I was really moved to write that essay, and I'm very glad it's in Dryland. Another essay I want to read is, well, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's similar themes about my family. So all of these essays are part of or connected to the book I'm writing of creative nonfiction, memoir. This essay is called Other Alive Creatures, and it was part of, it was published because I was one of the finalists for the Fresh Voices Fellowships with Epiphany Magazine. So I will read a little bit, and it's about my family, and it's also about where I'm from in Northern California. It's a city called Antioch, so kind of really trying to have a sense of space and place. So juxtaposing Antioch with LA, and this was written in the context of the summer of the Black Lives Matter uprising and also that first summer of COVID. So I will read a little part of this. This is called Other Alive Creatures. On the map, it's called the Delta. As a child, I often ran my palms down the slippery moss of the great boulders by the shore. There is no sand there, no beach, only the waters lapping at these boulders that were bigger than me. To walk onto the pier, I had to cross train tracks, passing a single flimsy railroad crossing sign which was fitted with two small red lights. I had to run when I heard the warning bells ring. I could only run to the parking lot or pier. I always picked the pier. My father would bring a cooler filled with cubed ice from 7-Eleven, thin fishing poles, loops of shiny fishing line, and little wiggling worms and other alive creatures inside clear plastic bags tied with a twist. He would always bring a mobile battery-powered radio for playing his favorite music, sad songs by Mexican men like Vicente Fernandez and Antonio Aguilar. A sadness my father never spoke but sang, between Marlboro Red cigarette puffs and sips of Budweiser beer that became lukewarm as the sun rose across the sky. He often drank too much, but never on fishing days. On fishing days, he concentrated on pulling his snapback low over his eyes as he searched the waves to see something else that was alive. From the creaking wooden pier, between the waves and the music, I watched as my father would throw the bait out and up into sky and sunlight. My parents raised me here, where the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers unite. Here, where the Pacific Ocean pours itself inland to the San Francisco Bay, where the water meets itself home again. This is the Delta, where you can look and look, but find no visible demarcation line between the salt waters and the fresh waters. This means that the fish taught me how to move between elements with ease, that home is an always moving thing. My hometown calls itself the Gateway to the Delta, and this is where I'm from. After packing the fish on ice, we would take the cooler home. If we were lucky, it was a combination of striped bass, steelhead, and sturgeon. I'd watch as my mother would slice open fish bellies over the sink. Dark red blood seeped down the drain as she scooped quivering entrails with her fingertips. Sometimes my mother fried the fish in vegetable oil on the stovetop, and other times my father would cook them on the black grill that was shaped like a three-pronged UFO with wheels. We always ate the fish with tortillas de maíz, crema, y limón con sal. The Delta sustained me, and this is how I learned to survive. I'm trying to see, I think maybe I'll go skip towards the end. I stay up too late listening to a podcast about climate change and learn new terms like blue lining and desalination plants. I listen some more and I'm reminded of old words like panic and fear. I search online for climate change in the Bay Area and find an article with an interactive map of the Delta. You can sit on your couch in the comfort of your living room and click through to see the severity of catastrophe, see all the algorithms and data, how number 1 signifies the best case scenario and number 10 is the worst. I click on 10. I try to tell myself that the future will not only exist in a computer simulation when I see that the digital map is suddenly nearly all blue. My hometown is projected to be underwater. The Pacific will flood the Delta, but it won't stop there. The flooding will seep all the way up north to Sacramento. Ocean creatures of all kinds and sea salt waves will reclaim the land as these cities named after settlers are drowned off the map, one after the other. And then I'm going to skip, but just to paraphrase, so I'm kind of, this was my last visit. This next part is about my last visit home for Christmas. I believe it was Christmas 2019. So, just 3 months before COVID hit. And kind of just watching my mother get ready to go to work. So she works in fast food for minimum wage, and just kind of how difficult it is, and how she kind of cares for my brothers. And I'm kind of wondering whether she can go, back home to Michoacan. And in this essay, I'm kind of exploring, well, I don't think she'll ever go back home. I don't think she'll ever be able to visit again, because she's needed here or by my brothers. When me and my son first arrived for our visit, there was nothing under the tree. The lack of any presents underneath a Christmas tree seems jarring, odd, incompatible with the excesses of America. But slowly, my mother gathered her holiday treasures from the dollar store, Walmart, and Dee Dee's discounts. She wrapped the presents in paper with images of a whimsical Santa Claus, even though we always go shopping together and already know what's inside. I remember doing this as a child too. I learned to pretend from my mother, a useful skill then and now in any number of situations. I pretended not to notice that my father spent less and less time at the apartment, a question that was easier not to ask. And it was not my father but my mother who boiled whole chickens in large cooking pots and left it on the stovetop for my brothers to eat before she went to work. And it was not my father but my mother who, after her shifts, brought oversized plastic bags of beans and rice that never taste quite right, but it's eaten anyway. My brothers, both of them, sleep for most of the day. One has a diagnosis from the county hospital's mental health ward, and the other does not, but there isn't enough help either way. And it was not my father, but my mother who cared for my brothers the best way she knew how, with her chicken and rice and beans and discounted presents under the tree. On her days off, when my mother wasn't cooking or sleeping, she painted each of her fingernails a different color with nail polish from miniature bottles that she bought on clearance. She fully extended her arm in front of her and splayed open her fingers to display the many delicate textures and shades: glittery shiny silver, neon pink gel, sky blue matte. She sat at the plastic folding table in the living room that was decorated with a single potted poinsettia wrapped in festive red foil. I only had just learned that poinsettia is a plant that is indigenous to the region that's now called Mexico. Poinsettia is not its real name, but somehow home found her here anyway. It is alive and beautiful, even in the dark. This is my mother's home now. The mold, the poinsettia, her nails, the sea salt air. She taught me that sometimes you must go and stay gone. And that's the end of that essay. I think, yeah, so these themes that I'm just interested in exploring at this time or for my first book is about home, the concept of home, place, space, diaspora, also the juxtaposition of Northern California and Southern California, parenting, intergenerational trauma and conflict, but also healing. So that line, my mother taught me, sometimes you must go and stay gone. Sometimes I feel like that because I've left Northern California and I don't think I'll ever go back, in a sense. So I think I'm interested in looking at just kind of the ramifications of, what does that mean in the context of, COVID and climate change and, all of these other issues that we're dealing with. I think I'll close with maybe just 3 short paragraphs from a book called The Roots That Help Us Grow. So I do have a copy of it. This is from a fellowship that I did with the Women's National Book Association for their Authentic Voices program. It was their inaugural year, so this was the first cohort. And there's the other people in my cohort. So their work is amazing. And the creative nonfiction piece that I wrote here is called A Starburst Within Myself. So I'll just read about the first 3 paragraphs. And this one is about, so Octavia Butler's also mentioned here. I'm also very interested in sci-fi, the speculative. So my second book project, which I've already started, is more experimental and hybrid, between prose and poetry. And this book is about, or this essay, A Starburst Within Myself, is about kind of the questions of literacy and what does it mean to learn language for myself as a child, but also what does language and literacy look like for someone like Octavia Butler, who's one of my creative writing heroes, a Black feminist science fiction writer. So I'll just read the little bit from the beginning here. A Starburst Within Myself. My father was my first library. At 3 years old, the sensation of happiness warmed my blood and bones as I learned to speak English, as I learned to be something like an American. I was born in California and not in Michoacan like my parents, so that meant that I carried their American dreams in a song that sounded like a lullaby, the ABCs. My father celebrated the hard American R's that didn't roll and the absence of the double L's like in our last name. Later, it seemed odd to me that several letters and tildes and accent marks didn't exist at all in the English language, but back then, I was taught to accept the disappeared. New literacies lived in my lungs as I sung the American letters. I never saw my father read any books, and he never read any to me, but he knew how to place me in front of the boxy TV set, the one he bought on credit from Sears and never repaid, to watch Sesame Street, Gullah Gullah Island, The Magic School Bus, and Reading Rainbow. It was LeVar Burton, a black man who rode in spaceships and who looked more like my father than not, who read books to me. My father did not read, but he was the one who turned on the TV and let me fall in love with all the letters that he didn't know. Now, I do not speak to my father, but he is still my library, and I'm still trying to make sense of this. Last year, I thought of my father as I watched the lead for Toshi Reagan's Parable of the Stower Opera sing to us inside UCLA's Royce Hall. At center stage, Lauren sang, "Have you seen my father? He left and never returned. Maybe I won't leave my father. Maybe he already left me." As I watched, there were starbursts in my left eye, even though all the lights in the theater were off except for a single spotlight above Lauren, her face turned upwards, seeking. And there's more, but in the interest of time, maybe I will skip to the end. Survival means not answering my father's call, not even when I became afraid of the military occupying downtown LA during the uprisings, or the text from the LA Public Health Department that warned of imminent danger during the worst of the winter wave. Survival means seeking safety elsewhere, but survival also means taking flight in my father's joy. Not now, but back then when I was a girl. It was joy that made my father wait for me in the public library's parking lot as I gathered armfuls of books from the turquoise-colored stacks that looked like the color of the ocean. I think that's when my father loved me the most. And every time, just before we drove from the parking lot, I looked across the street to Antioch High School. It was the home of the Black Panthers, but back then I was not aware of the Black Panthers in Oakland, which was just 30 miles across the bay. But I still saw survival in the Black Panther. Its fur dark and sleek, with sharp fangs and claws, slicing the air with a skill that I needed. I still do not speak to my father, but maybe I will see him when I enter Central Library again this summer. Maybe he still waits for me in the hunter green Jeep Cherokee with the radio blasting the bombastic voices of Spanish-language DJs, with all the double R's and L's in the world. Maybe he will be there among Octavia's books, even though I know her stories better than all the pain that my father could never tell me. And yet, I have learned to read without him beside me now. During the opera, Toshi sang that Lauren could feel another person's pain and know them better. As a writer, Octavia could not look away from pain, and she drew all the letters of the alphabet into her orbit to show it. And I cannot look away from my father's pain even when I close my eyes, because I can still see Starburst within myself, and I must follow the light. And I'll stop there.
I just finished typing right now a comment on the YouTube live chat on my phone that I love how you repeated it like several times. Maybe he will be there. Like it had like that last piece right there alone just had like that almost like poetic feel to it. That was awesome. And then again, I love, man, what you read was great. It was awesome. Just talking about your family. Another line that stood out to me in your other piece about your mother, like raising your brothers the best she could. It just makes me think about like my sister right now with her kids, because she is technically a single mother and she's doing the best she can to raise her 2 kids while she's, you know, working long hours at LVN. So that does definitely relate to me there. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up what I'm gonna say here to close us off. Alrighty, where is it? Okay, come on, load. Well, again, great job and thank you for reading. I'm happy you kicked off having a virtual My Place Cafe event for 2022. That's actually how last year's event series started. Well, you can't forget where you came from, right? but then again, I'm talking to myself here. Thank you to all who are watching. Thank you, Latanya, Jody, and all the baristas at My Place Cafe. To get in touch with Cecilia Caballero, follow her on Twitter, la_sangre_llama. Again, I will post how it's typed in the comments for this video. Earlier, I mentioned I met Caballero at Re Arte. As of today, Re Arte is an online-only business. This is unfortunately due to a property management dispute. If you want to support Re Arte, join a virtual workshop led by Macedillo, Viva Padilla, and or Tongo Eason Martin. In fact, he has a workshop with Re Arte next Saturday at 3 p.m. You can visit Re Arte's social media pages to find out and or direct message them on how to obtain links for these workshops. I will write that in the comment section of this video. Wait, what am I writing down in the comment section of this video? Oh yeah, the handles for Re Arte. I'm already like losing track because I'm starting. It's been a long day for me. Another way to support Re Arte is to buy books on their website, reartela.com, or at Dryland Magazine's website, drylandla.org. You can also Venmo Re Arte at reartela. I will also type that in the comment section. Next Saturday, Spectrum Publishing will have their Spectrum 30 release party. Buy a copy around 2 p.m. before the 3 p.m. start time for this party full of poets. You can pay ahead of time by sending the PayPal payment of $10 for a copy to usgtgregory@gmail.com. If you're watching this event and you're one of the published writers or artists or photographers, you only pay $5. So have a great Sunday, everyone. And remember, make my place your place.